loves. This is Halo Saranko of Shakti Temple Arts, and I am a teacher of temple dance, tantra, and priestess arts. And today I'm feeling inspired to talk about a subject that is very, very dear to my heart, a subject and practice, and that is the Taoist Jade Egg practices for women's sexual energy cultivation. And what's inspiring me to talk about this practice right now is, for one, this is a big piece of my work, is sharing the traditional aspects of these practices, where they came from, the kind of quintessential traditional version of these practices. And also just recognizing that there's this huge awakening happening right now in the women's health and spirituality world, where we are being drawn into these practices, and there's simultaneously a huge explosion of these Taoist Jade Egg or even Yoni eggs and their practices happening right now, which is such a gift that there is so much at our fingertips in this day and age. And simultaneously, what tends to happen to these old traditions that come into the West is the Western mindset seems to have a little bit more of a fixation on the physical aspect of practices. You can really see this in the explosion of yoga, which has largely been an insane gift to the West, to have yoga just on every corner. However, when you section off, like for instance with yoga, asana, or specifically the physical postures, have been kind of sectioned off from a much larger, more intricate system. And this is also true of the Jade Egg practices, where a practice that is indeed great for your overall yoni health and for having better orgasms and for increasing your pleasure, but it's also quite literally a path to awakening that comes from the Taoist tradition. And as a traditionalist, I have deep passion for these old lineages. And the power of lineage is that it's a tradition and teachings that are passed on from teacher to student, teacher to student, teacher to student, and it becomes this unbroken chain. So there's this immense amount of power coming down through the teachers to the students, who then become teachers. And it's just, it creates this Shakti, for lack of a better term, just this energy that reaches way back to the beginnings of these practices, and I find this very important. So within the Taoist system, I think what's important to me to share is that a lot of the Jade Egg and Yoni Egg stuff that I'm seeing online doesn't talk about Taoism. It doesn't talk about the tradition that these practices have come from. There's no root in the foundation of the spiritual lineage that these practices have derived from. And without that, you're missing basically the nectar of the practices, without understanding what Taoism is, without understanding the concepts of yin and yang, without understanding how the body's energetic system works in this tradition's lens. So that's just something I felt inspired to share about, because there is so much depth in these practices. There's so far you can go beyond toning your yoni muscles and having greater pleasure and all this. This is a practice to refill your cup as a woman, to balance the energies of the masculine and feminine within your own body, mind, and spirit, and to ultimately be able to do that with a lover, and also essentially go from sex to super consciousness. That's the aim of these practices. So we can get stuck in the kind of lower realms of, more pleasure, but ultimately we want to expand so wide that we're in union with all things, with nature specifically, which is a really important Taoist principle, is how to harness the force of nature and use it for longevity, for spiritual attainment, for balance, essentially, in all aspects of our life. So these practices, the energetic, in my viewpoint and my experience within the tradition, the energetic aspects of these practices are the most important. And this is another piece that I'm not seeing passed on as prevalently as I would like to see. But these are, the egg is a tool, an ally, right? But ultimately it's to help us move energy. If we're simply using it as a physical tool or something to wear because it's fun to have a gem in your yoni, which it is, but you're missing kind of the bigger piece, which is to learn how to work with our energy. And as I said, kind of the quintessential nectar of this practice is to be able to fill our own cup. We live in a world that there's so much outpouring of energy, that to hold these lineages and these practices that teach us how to dive back into the yin, back into receptivity, is so important. To learn how to really harness our energy and channel it consciously throughout the body so that our systems are working fluidly. Our body, our mind, our spirit, our connection with other, our connection with nature. So that I see as one of the most important pieces of these practices. The other piece I want to share about that I feel is important that the information gets out is that, again, with these practices, there's kind of a overarching yoni egg, yay, thing going on, which is great. And again, traditionally they worked with jade. And there are a couple other crystals that I recommend working with, and that's rose quartz and obsidian for different things. Obsidian's really great. It's kind of a strong Kali energy, so for really going into letting some deep traumas go intentionally. You don't want to work with this if you're not ready to kind of face the skeletons in the closet, so to speak. And then rose quartz is kind of on the other end of the spectrum of being very delicate and very gentle and very soothing if there's kind of more immediate sexual trauma or just a need to reconnect the channels of the womb and the heart, which jade also is very beneficial for. So those are the three crystals that I recommend working with. I know a lot of people really love to work with clear quartz, so that's also amazing. But to have all these kind of variety of yoni crystals that people are using doesn't fully resonate for me. And again, I don't believe in absolutes, so this is just me sharing from my experience within the tradition and my experience working with gem allies and my experience of working with the energies of the womb and yoni. But there are a few really important pieces here. And they're more on the physical level of particular gemstones, and that is that some gemstones are actually toxic. And one of those toxic gemstones is a jade look-alike called serpentine. So if you are curious about the jade egg practices and you're looking to buy eggs, I do not suggest buying them off of eBay. I wholeheartedly recommend buying them from reputable sources because serpentine looks very much like jade. And you'll think that you've gotten a great deal because it's way cheaper than jade, and it will actually frequently be marketed as serpentine jade, but not always. Sometimes it's just marked as straight up jade. So you want to be really, really mindful of this. A real genuine nephrite jade egg will be around $50 to $60. So that's not expensive. It's actually a semi-precious gemstone. So you really want to invest in the correct stone. Another one that's passed off as jade quite frequently is soapstone. And soapstone is much softer than jade, which makes it less sanitary because it's more porous stone. And it's just a duller energy field, so you're not going to get the power that you get with jade in these practices. So again, they'll frequently sell these on eBay and different places like that in sets of 3, and it's a great deal, but it's not the real thing. So that's important to note. A couple other gems that you should never put in your yoni because they're also toxic are malachite and lapis. Lazuli. So these are 2 stones that are wonderful to work with on an energetic level, but not on a physical level, especially in one of the most absorbent parts of your body. And then the other note here is, like I was saying about jade being a really hard stone, it's not very porous. So as far as hygiene is concerned, your juices aren't going to get into the stone and then sit there after you wash it. Whereas with more soft stones, which many gemstones are soft, you can actually, I think, look up their hardness, and there's a scale of different gemstones, diamond being the hardest stone, I think, on the planet. Jade is very hard. I think one way to tell genuine jade is if you try to scratch it with a piece of glass, it won't scratch. So that's how hard it is. Other stones that do scratch or that are more porous can collect bacteria and then cause infections, and it's just something to be really mindful of. Other stones, just simply on an energetic frequency, are not beneficial to have in that energy center of the body. So you don't want to just go, through the colors of the rainbow, having all these different yoni eggs and gemstones without knowing much about it. And I highly recommend, if you're beginning with the practice, start with jade. Start with jade. Start with the roots of this tradition. Get to know the roots before you start improvising. I am all about improvisation, and I think that the more we get to know practices and the energy in our body, our own energy starts to inform our practice. But we want to have training wheels first, right? So that's the importance of kind of getting the practices, ideally receiving them as a transmission from a teacher or from a reputable book or something of this nature, rather than just shooting in the dark. One other note here, and this is something I've run into a few times as a teacher of this art form, and that is that nothing should be left in the yoni for longer than about 12 hours. Nothing. Not your jade egg. She likes to breathe. So even though the jade is very nurturing for her, and it's a very wonderful thing to leave your egg in, to sleep with it in, to go to yoga class with it in, to wear it throughout the day just for fun, and to have some practice time that nobody else gets to know about. It's very fun, but don't leave them in longer than 12 hours. Your yoni is self-cleansing, and she's constantly got a flow of fluids happening, and she needs to be able to breathe, essentially. So yeah, that's another piece I wanted to share. So yeah, that was my inspiration for today, to share these little pieces about starting a jade egg practice and my particular feelings on this. Again, nothing is absolute, and this is just from my own background of being raised with a Taoist father who practices Tai Chi and Qigong, and entering into this tradition from a very young age. And I just love tradition. I find so much power in it, and we live in a day and age where tradition is quickly crumbling kind of in globalization. So the more we can kind of hold these threads and honor them, I think the better. Because like I said in the beginning, there's just so much power in them. So anyways, thank you for being with me today in this, and stay tuned for offerings from myself in this realm that are linked into tradition. And there are several other amazing teachers of this art form out there, and I just highly recommend finding a teacher to initiate you into these practices, because they are so beneficial, and it is ultimately a great blessing that this practice is blossoming, because these are practices that every woman should know about and have in her tool basket of self-care and self-realization. So thank you again, and I look forward to sharing more of my passion with you in future videos.